We're live. It is 5 minutes before the hour, 5 minutes before 7. Came in a little early, a couple minutes late sometimes, a couple minutes early, right on the dot. It's all good. Hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving. I did, got to see family. We even went up today up to the Sierras, and some of the family was getting Christmas trees and stuff. And, it's always good spending time with the family. It's always awesome stuff. The traffic, not so much fun, but spending time with family, definitely awesome. Tonight, we're going to talk about a couple things. One is I am finishing up a video. I've already shot it. I'll be editing it. A comparison between the L67 3800 series, excuse me, Series 2 V6 that I ran, and the L32 Series 3 3800 supercharged V6 that I ran, and a comparison between those two. Because if you look at we take a look at the factory power rating, just my lighting over here. If you take a look at the factory power rating, there's about a 20 horsepower difference. But that's not what I saw when we dynoed them. So I'm going to go over why that was. So my question is the only difference there are a couple of differences between those motors. I don't think the cam's different. I don't think the compression is different. Displacement's not different. I'm told that the cylinder heads are a little bit different, but in our case, on the L67, we ran L32 heads anyways. Now, I measured the valves on both the L67 and the L32 that I have, just random motors that I got from the wrecking yard. Valve sizes were the same. I'm told that the valve sizes are a little bit bigger on the L32. I didn't see that on the ones I measure. I haven't measured all of them, obviously. But we know that the Gen 5 blower is better. We know that the throttle opening on the Gen 5 blower is bigger and the throttle body is bigger. We know that the intake manifold is different because you have a dedicated intake manifold for the Gen 5 blower that is different than the one used on the L67. So you have those changes. The interesting thing is I compare them at a bunch of different modifications levels. We compared them stock pulley, stock blower, stock intake, stock throttle body, all that stuff. Now, we're not using the factory mass aerometer. We're using a speed density system. We're optimizing the air, fuel, and timing, which a lot of times the factory does not do. But the interesting thing is I didn't see a big change in boost between the two. Both of them at 6,000 RPM were 8.1 or 8.2 pounds. So you would think if we have a bigger throttle opening and if we have the same blower speed with bigger throttle opening and a better blower, that we would see more boost. Now, I didn't overlay the curves. It looks like we might see a little bit more low speed power. That's not going to help us with the peak power, though. That's not going to show a 20 horsepower peak power rating. But, even though that happened, we still have a big difference in the power outputs of the two motors that I tested. And again, we'll go over that in the video. But my question is if we did see a change in power between the two, and the L67 stock for stock basically made more power with all of the stock stuff on the L67. My question then is, if we get a good version of the L32 from the wrecking yard, should it be 20 better than whatever that motor was? Or the other option is some of that just in the tune? We know the blower's better. We know the throttle body's bigger. We know the intake manifold's different. Ostensibly, it should be bigger. It should be better because of the opening in the blower from the blower going down into the manifold is bigger. Maybe it flows more. So that should all be better. Did the factory just detune it, which they've done in other applications before? Less timing, less aggressive timing curve, less aggressive airfield curve. Is that some of it? And then we don't see as much of that because we have optimized tunes on both of them. I ran them both on 91 pump gas, both on E85, comparing them modified with a pulley and a blower, and then with a camshaft and stuff. And we see a fairly consistent theme going throughout the whole video. So it'll be interesting. So my question is, what I'm hoping is that we could see more power starting off from the L32, and then that would translate into more power everywhere all the time. That's my desire. That's my ideal situation. I'm also hoping, and I would like to see, I get comments all the time when we post these videos about guys making 400 or 500 at the tire or whatever. And it makes me wonder exactly what their combinations are. I mean, I know that they're running very, very small pulleys, but you're not going to get there with a small pulley, because even if we put a 2.5-inch pulley on there and sped the blower up, it might be making 20 pounds or something, but it's not going to be anywhere near that power number, even spinning that blower with everything that it has. So I'm assuming that all of those guys are porting those blowers, putting bigger throttle inlets in them so that the blower will move more airflow. I'm also wondering if they're changing the blower housings to something else. I would assume that they're also running intercoolers on them. So maybe, who knows, maybe with a stock short block and a big cam and all of that stuff, maybe it gets up there. But to me, 500 at the tire seems like 600 at the flywheel. That's kind of the way that we look at it, and the way that it translates, at least from our numbers, to what we see on the chassis dyno. It's about 100 horsepower. Might be more on a front wheel drive with an automatic. I don't know, depending on tire size and stuff, but it's going to be near that number. So making 600 with this, or essentially 200 more than we're at now, with this blower already having a 3-inch pulley and a at least reasonable camshaft in there. It's not big. It's a 210, 220 cam and only 510 lift. So, we'll have to see. Maybe I'll be interested to see. I need a good intercooler for this thing if I'm going to try to do something like that, because I'm sure that those guys got to be running 20 plus pounds of boost. And so porting the discharge and, getting the inlet side in is really the critical element, but also, I'm sure that there's going to be some power to be had from porting the outlet. Now, maybe they're going to a different blower housing. Maybe they're using that rotor pack or some sort of lightened rotor pack or something else that's takes it away really from being like, when somebody says I made this much with this motor, to me, that's that they made it with this Gen 5 blower. Maybe they ported the blower, but they didn't put a new rotor pack in it, and they didn't change the housing to a different housing. Then it's not that blower anymore. You may as well just put a 112 in it or something, or a 122 or a 2.3 or something bigger than that. That's just me. I'd like to see it done with that, the blower housing, the blower rotor pack that came with there, and then modify it and see what happens. I got a little string here. And so we're going to see what happens when we do all that testing. I would like to get an intercooler, but I'd like to get a good one for that. An air to water sandwich between the two would be good to get the charge temperature down, because we know from the water meth test that the charge temperature is pretty hot, especially if we do successful runs. The nice thing about having the water meth on there, I could say this, that the charge temperatures seem to be fairly repeatable. And I know that I have a couple of guys that are running off about it not being accurate and the water temperature is not that low, and we're just spraying mist on there. But I know when I take my Type K thermocouple and put it in water, it tells me the temperature of the water. And we see a change in temperature as we added more water meth, which stands as a reason that we would be lowering the temperature more. So all of that's very interesting. And one of the things I pointed out to one of them is that they're missing part of that equation, that it didn't really lower the charge temperature that much. That it must not be that, because we're not seeing a big power gain. You're missing part of the equation. I'm not going to tell them what it is, but they'll eventually get to it and figure out what it is. So we want to run that thing up. But what I really want to do is that the next interesting comparison for me is going to be running a turbo and comparing that to the blower at the same boost level. The problem with that is that if we only ran 10 pounds, like I could run 8 pounds or whatever, 10 pounds with no intercooler. But on a turbo, I'm going to run an intercooler, because everybody would. Nobody would run a turbo without an intercooler unless you were doing water meth injection. And I would kind of like to do that, because I'd like to try running like at a fixed boost level with an electronic controller, and then run water meth both before and after the turbo, just because people have been wanting to see that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens pre-turbo. Did we change the efficiency rating of the turbo and make it more efficient? And maybe you have to do that when you max it out. But it'll be interesting to see. I think the theory that the spinning blades are going to chop up the droplet size and homogenize the thing and make the charge going better. I don't think that that's going to happen. I think if anything, if you saw a bigger change in power, maybe you made the blower more efficient. So again, all that will be interesting. The other thing with the water meth deal is that introducing just fuel and or just water, like I'd like to do both of those. I'd like to just put methanol in there and see what happens, or even E85 in the water meth kit and just run E85 through that. And then do it. Obviously, we have to do it with 91 because everybody wants it with 91. They want to see it change something because it doesn't change power. It didn't change power by itself because we already had enough timing and we had the right fuel in it. We just wanted to see if the water meth did anything. Does it change power? Is it a power adder? It's not. What it is it helps suppress detonation. So then you could do other things, but we turned the timing up and it didn't add any power. So with what they want to see is running 91 and then not enough timing. And then that allows us to add timing. And then we see the power. That's what everybody wants to see. For me, I want to see if you can take 91 with water meth, and water meth, not just methanol, but methanol would also work. And then can we get that? Because I'm wondering if more people that run water meth and not straight methanol. I wonder what percentage of the group does that. So I'd like to compare that to running E85. If we run E85 on a turbo application, especially, we know we're going to gain power. We know we're going to gain power on a supercharge application too. We're going to gain power just with the 85 all by itself. And then we can gain even more because we can add more timing, especially compared to 91. So it'd be interesting to see if the 91 plus water meth plus the timing can make as much power as the E85. So lots of cool testing still to come on all of this stuff. But I want to see how well the turbo does compared to the supercharger, but it's non-intercooled. So I would really like to have an intercooler for the 3800 to give it a fair shake as a comparison between the turbo, because the turbo is definitely going to make more power. It doesn't have the parasitic loss associated with driving the blower, and that's going to become more pronounced as we spin the blower faster and faster. It's going to become hotter and less efficient and not do as well. I mean, we were already at, before we put the cam in, we were already at near 15 pounds. So, it'll be interesting because at 15 pounds, I think it was making 215. So it should be, it's going to be over 400, 410, 20, 30, something like that. So we'll see. The other thing that somebody wants me to do, and let me know, you guys, and I want to do this too, is we did the turbo, or we did the cam swap on the supercharged version, but he wanted to see how much the cam made NA, which is good information, because then we can kind of go, okay, well, it made this much NA and it made this much supercharged. Are we getting more supercharged than we are getting NA? Are we getting the same amount? Should we be getting more? All that's good data, because then it's comparative data. Then we can kind of figure out more things if we have these multiple data points. So I think that's a good idea. Also, I want to see what it does to the NA motor, because then if we put a bigger camshaft in it, we can go, okay, well, we put a bigger camshaft in it and it did this. And I already kind of see it, the trend towards shifting it out higher in RPM, which is kind of typical of camshafts anyway. That's kind of what we want if we're going to do this big bang thing, which I probably will do on this motor. We'll have to put ring gap in it and head studs, and we'll have to surface the deck and the deck of the head. But I'm also going to port the head. I'm not going to port that. I am going to do one head or one version of the head, and or somebody else that just does a light port job. Might not be me. We'll do a mild version of a ported head, and then we'll do a more serious one, and then that one will probably go on the big bang deal. And on the big bang deal will happen after we do the intake testing too. We'll do the sealed up gutted blower housing deal, and then we'll do the NA intakes. Hopefully I might have a line on, somebody was talking to me about getting one of the Aussie ones, so we could run one of those. And then I think I have from one of the guys sending the inserts into the NA intake manifold. So it'll be interesting to test. There's a lot of cool testing and a lot of good data, and hopefully the more we get out there, the more information guys have, and they can make the decisions on what they need to do and not to do. Some guys, it's obvious from the comments, that no amount of data is going to sway them from what they've already decided is the right thing. We get a lot of that out in the world right now, that no amount of facts are going to change what anybody believes. That's why one of them is a belief and one of them is a fact. And I get that with the comments that it doesn't matter what happened with the temperature data or the power data or any of that. I'm convinced that this is the way that it is, and so therefore it must be right. Oh, okay, that's cool. Just go on about your business and do the thing that you're doing. That works out really well. So after this is the video that I'm posting now will be the last 3800 video for a little bit, and I've got to do some other things. When I go back down, I'm hoping to do the ported heads, different camshaft, and the NA intake manifolds. But what I also want to do is the Dodge. So we want to do the 5.9 360. We'll run a few tests with that and probably run. I'm hoping to get a turbo on the Dodge 5.9 Magnum. The other thing that I want to do on the Magnum is I want to do some throttle body tests on the Kager manifold. We already ran the cool 3D printed one from the guys at UT Awesome, and that worked really well. It's a cool piece, and it definitely picked up power over the stock one, and we ran their modified one. If you guys haven't seen it, there's a video or a Engine Masters episode up on the manifolds. I think is up already, and then also on the piston flip thing that we did, that's up there as well. So I'm sure that Uncle Tony is gonna march around and rant and rave and stuff, and you know how he does it. But that's also interesting. But I want to do some of that testing. One of the things that I want to do is I'm gonna machine out one of the Kager manifolds so that it will accept a 500 CFM 2-barrel Holley. So we'll see if I can run fuel through that and if that works. If nothing else, so we could use it as the throttle body, and that will help. But I want to try other manifolds, because I know from the manifold testing that we did for Engine Masters that a dual plane carbureted intake is really a better choice for that thing for making power, and especially if we put decent heads on it and a good size like a 224 or 230 cam in it, it's going to definitely work better with a dual plane intake manifold. The Kager stuff obviously works good for stock and mild applications and small camshafts, and I'm going to run that. I'm going to run the modified Kager that the UT Awesome guys sent, which is awesome. It turned out really nice. And then I'm going to run it with their camshaft, because they have a camshaft that has a tighter LSA. It's got to concentrate power down low more than the camshaft that I ran. And so it probably will be a better combination with that Kager manifold. But it would do the same thing with any manifold. With a dual planer, you shouldn't run it with a single plane, because you shouldn't run those any of the small camshafts with a single plane. You shouldn't be thinking about single plane until you get up in bigger camshafts. But it will be an interesting combination to see the Kager manifold is by very low speed power. So I think we were near 300 horsepower, but 400 foot-pounds. And I think we loaded that thing down at like 2,000 RPM. So it's still working fairly well even down there, which is, kind of desirable for the truck applications. So let's see what kind of questions you guys have. Have you ever considered testing water meth on closed loop? So you just want the Samco, you just want the Holley to tune while we're making the run. I like to have all of that done and then make the finished run when everything is right. I don't like to have it tuning while I'm making the run. I just go in and make the changes, and that works the same, because we end up the same way. Forget the water. I thought I mentioned that I want to test just water injection, and see what it does, how it varies. I want to see what it does for charge temperature more than anything, and then just meth, and then do a 50-50 mix, and that way we kind of have covered all the bases, and see what happens. Water injection by itself should hurt power. It shouldn't change the air fuel. It should change the charge temperature, but it should suppress detonation. The methanol, I'm hoping, adds power, but we'll have to see how all that plays out. That's why we test, because we have theories, and then until we have test data, we don't have facts. Guys make 700 plus without adding ring gap. So what is the? Can't wait to see what happens on your Big Bang. DJ, what is the factory ring gap? Does anybody know? I would imagine on a blower motor that it might be a little bit bigger anyway, but yeah, sad that we don't have 93. Yeah, we don't have it in California. All we have is 91. Tyler or Richard, there'll always be haters. No matter what, you could go out and say, I love puppies, and there would be people, wow, I hate puppies. Puppies are stupid. I don't know. Don't let them get to you. I don't. It's all good stuff. Us 3,800 enthusiasts are a tough crowd. Not really. It's just a bit. You guys have cams, you got blower pulleys, you got throttle body upgrades and Oh, where's my internet thing here? The only thing you don't really have are cylinder heads, and there's somebody really needs to have aluminum cylinder heads for that thing. But somebody mentioned nitrous. I do want to run nitrous on this thing too. Adventures of Abbott, like nitrous. I hate filling stuff other than the fuel tank. That's why I went with the 2 air-to-water air coolers on my twin Gen 5 M90 LS. So you have an LS with twin M5 or Gen 5 M90s? That's kind of cool. DK K24A2 turbo. I have MLS head gasket that's 1 millimeter overbore. Can I use it with my stock bar engine? Yes, we run head gaskets on stuff that are bigger. Like we run the LS9 head gasket, which is an MLS gasket, and it's designed for the 6.2, and we run it on 5.3s, that kind of stuff all the time. And if it's new, D, and your and the deck surface and the block and the header new, you don't need to spray it with anything. If it's used, we sometimes spray them. Matt, have you ever tested the Edelbrock Performer 5.8 truck Ford manifold? I don't think that I have. I don't remember running the 5.8 EFI stuff other than the stock one. And I think we ran most of the 5.8 stuff later on carbureted. Yeah, DK, it's not a problem at all. It will work fine. It's very rare that people actually hurt a head gasket from a strength issue of the head gasket, like a design strength of the head gasket. There are some that are like cheap, like even worse than stock replacement kind of head gaskets. You can blow those out, but that's okay, because then that's like the safety fuse. But if you blow out an MLS gasket, you've hurt something else. You've torched the head or torched the block or something, or torched a piston or rod, something. Killer Clowns, what's your thought on twin turbos versus single turbo? What do you think is best for a street? That doesn't matter. Whatever fits and whatever you like the looks of, that they'll both do the same thing. Just size them appropriately for the combination of response rate that you want and then ultimate size for the power that you want. James, did I hear you say you won't use an intercooler on the turbo setup? No, I said that if I don't run an intercooler on the blower, which we don't have yet, maybe I can get one to borrow, that if I compare it to the turbo, I have to run the turbo with no intercooler, but I'll only do that at a lower boost level, 8 or 10 pounds or something. And then when we turn the boost up, then we'll run an intercooler on everything. DJ, factory ring gap for us is whatever the junkyard gives us. I understand that. With a 100,000-mile motor, I haven't seen that vary. I take that back. I have seen it vary, but not by mileage though. We have a lot of LS motors where the ring gap varies. The factory ring gap varies a lot, and the motor is broken in, but you still have no idea what the ring gap is. Could be 14 thousandths, and it won't last very long. It's not going to last very long at 32 pounds at 14 thousandths ring gap. If we tune for 93 but use pump 91, will water meth compensate? Yeah, two octane points should easily be compensated for by water meth, but water meth is going to change the air fuel though. Somebody wants to know. So you don't have your name on there, so I don't know how to respond to you for your question. So your name needs to be on there. And the kind of pie that I like best is cherry pie. Do you remember the Chevy 265? Yes. What do you think I can safely squeeze out of it? You're going to have some issues with that motor. The bore size is not very good for the amount of, it limits head choices. So that's going to be a problem. Total 65 Muses, total timing, small block Ford versus small block Chevy. You can't do that based on who made the engine because that doesn't tell you anything. You have to look because they're different Chevys want different timing, different cylinder heads want different timing, different compression wants different timing, whether it's a Ford or a Chevy, doesn't matter. So you need to be very specific about the engine that you want and not just a small block Ford or just a small block Chevy. A Vortex small block Chevy wants different timing than an L98 headed motor does or an 882 headed motor does. So the timing can be all over the board. Typically, you're going to be somewhere between 30 and 36 degrees. Yeah, Mike, that's true. If you break it with an MLS head gasket, it's broken because the head gasket's not going to let go. If you torch the an MLS head gasket, it's because it took the gasket as it was taking the head out, torching the block, whatever. DJ, guess I could open up the Chilton manual or Google the stock ring gap. I'll let you know when I take or at least what the one that we got, the L67. I should have checked the L32 before I threw it away. I just threw away the broken short block, basically. When I take the L67 apart, I'll find out what the ring gap is, and I'll let you know what it was. And we've already run almost 15 pounds with it. Blind Guy Garage with the Trailblazer SS intake manifold on a 4.8 help it very much. Not really. Very much. I don't know what a Woodstock cam is and everything else. Also, what cam would be a good upgrade but not destroy fuel mileage. You want something small. I don't know what the Woodstock cam is. The Truck Norris cam or even something smaller like the Torque cam. Although the Truck Norris cam, Brian told me, makes the same low speed power as the last version of the Torque cam. So something like that is what you're going to want, especially on a 4.8. James, I might be getting an intercooler to borrow for the blower. When you blow an MLS MLS, you get a head that looks like the 2.5 Dodge motor. That's true. That thing was torched pretty bad. David Wild, GM manual specs, 10 to 18 for the top ring. So this is for the 3800, I'm assuming. 23 to 33 for the second ring. Does not spec NA versus SC. I'm hoping that they would be on the high sides of those for the blower motor. Like 33 would be more than enough on that bore size. 10 would not be. 18 would be a lot better. I'd feel a lot more comfortable with. But I would want, normally we put 7 thousandths per inch of bore. So that's going to put it in the mid 20s. David Vizard said he polished a cam and gained 20 horsepower. No. I would like to see that test. How much boost can an LS hold with copper sprayed gaskets? I'm not sure I understand your question. Which gasket are you talking about? Are you talking about a factory gasket? Or are you talking about an MLS gasket? Or are you talking about an LS9 gasket? And the copper spray is not going to change the strength of the gasket at all. The strength of the gasket is going to be the strength of the gasket. The copper spray actually just stops it from leaking water normally. Swamp Goat, it will make so much more with a turbo on it. I'm sure you're talking about the 3800. Every time I've tested turbo versus a supercharger, especially a root supercharger, and like in this case, a non-intercooled one, it's gonna be a big difference in power. Carter Motorsports. Hey, Richard, I believe I have the 3800 top end. You're ultimate looking to test for the Big Bang. What's the best way to reach you? I'll put my email address down here. Hopefully that went in. Yeah, let me know what you have. What I'm planning on is, like I said, some kind of intake manifold, maybe the Aussie one, depending on which one works best. I want to demonstrate that, how they all work, not necessarily under boost, but even NA, because it's going to be the same. I'm going to select a cam, turbo cam, and a ported head. NGK, excuse me, NGK TR55 are good spark plugs to run on a 38 until the boost gets really high. We will be running probably a heat range 9 on when we turn the boost up. Killer Clown, what are your thoughts on E85? It works very well. What do you think is a good option for Turbo 5.3? Trying to make 1,000 horsepower. 5.3, head studs, gaskets, springs, almost any kind of cam. If you're looking for a cam, I still have one left. It's 1,000 horsepower cam, as most of them are. Put an S475 or a VS Racing 7875, an S480, all of those kinds of things will get you to 1,000 horsepower. And then, I don't know what you're doing with the motor. Like, you're going to spend most of the time driving around at a lower boost and stuff. What kind of RPM you want to run. For a 5.3, for a street car that a guy wants to do 1,000 horsepower with, I usually pick a milder cam, and then you just turn the boost up and make the power. I was thinking Corvette Crossfire injection intake on a 265. The intake is not going to be what limits you, although that will be cool. But there are lots of good intake manifolds for dual planes and stuff and polishing, bigger valves. Again, the problem is you're limited in the valve size that you can go to because you don't have enough bore size. Blind Guy Garage. The Trailblazer SS intake is not going to kill fuel mileage. It's just you're not going to get the benefits from it the way that you would on a wilder application. The more cams you have to put in it, the more RPM you're going to be running on the 4.8, the Trailblazer SS is going to want to make more power at a higher engine speed than the stock truck manifold. The stock truck manifold works really well, especially on a 4.8. And unless you're trying to make lots of power at 6,500 or 7,000 RPM in a 4.8, I wouldn't even upgrade the intake manifold. I wouldn't spend the money on it. Put a mild camshaft in it. Like I said, the torque cam, a 202 kind of duration thing, so that it doesn't hurt fuel mileage. Daniel, Richard, I'm throwing away my free E3 plugs. they're not gonna help you. LS1 stock AC Delco 6 plugs call for 60 thousandths gap. Yeah, they may want you to do that, and usually the gap is more for emissions and fuel mileage. We don't ever run that much gap in anything. I would just bring the gap down, especially if you're going to run an NA. You can run 30 or 40 or something. The gap's not going to make any difference in power. We run gap all the way down to 19 in some of the turbo stuff. I may have found a head for the 2.5. Bandit guy here, the L32 has superior rods compared to the L67. Woodstock cam. Okay, that makes sense. Turbo FE big block, that would be good. Do you have Holdner recipe lists for different engine builds posted anywhere? Yeah, up on the channel. Up on this channel, there are 300 horsepower combos, 400 horsepower, 500, all the way up to 1,000. So just take a look at all those, and it'll tell you all of the major components to use. Yeah, DJ, I thought you said that the L32 rods are hardly better, so only a tiny bit better. I thought that you had said that before, and which is why I'm going to run the L67. Yeah, I don't know. Blind Guy Garage, 20 horsepower off a polished camshaft sounds like a lot of bull. I agree. And the thing would have to be really, really rough for you to lose 20 horsepower in frictional losses, because I don't know how else you lose that. And it'd have to be really bad. It'd have to be so bad that it was taking the lifter out to be a problem. 20 horsepower is a lot. People don't realize. I'm sure David does. And that's why I'd like to see that test duplicated. David, thank you very much. HV3 I sent will ship tomorrow if I have a box. Inserts. Alex, what would you guess a well-tuned NA 3800 could do? I'd like to get this thing up to 300 if we could, with a reasonable cam. I mean, you can go crazy with it and spin it and put lots of camshaft in, lots of compression and a dry sump, and port whatever you could out of the heads and get them to flow, 240 or 250 or whatever somebody really good could get. And then maybe you could get 100 horsepower per liter, but it would take some work though. Snafu, without the copper sprayers for creating a smoother surface. No, I don't think that that's the case. You want the smooth surface to be the surface of the head. You have to have a specific RA number to use an MLS gasket, and that's not with spray on it. That's just the gasket by itself. I do want a dyno and FE Ford. I don't know if they make a crossflow head for the 292. The HV3 will work great with the turbo. Turbo and NA, it's the same. Excuse me. L67 versus L32, is there a difference in the piston dish volume? I thought that the compression was the same. DK, so 3.4-inch bore, K24 ring gap to 48 thousandths. No. No. You a 3.4 times 7 thousandths. So 21, 23 or 24 thousandths. Adventures, FYI, if it's negative 20 degrees outside, my winter 2000 Buick Regal hits 10.4 pounds on the gauge. We don't know how accurate the gauge is, but I would believe that it could be making more. Oregon, I have 1967 iron block 410. You don't see a lot of those. 4V Mercury 28 crank, 390 bore, all original. Nice. So blown 3800, no one has found a difference between the L32 and 67s. Nobody's found one to actually be weaker. To really, the problem is, even if somebody says one of them is stronger than the other, to actually find out what that is, like in a structured environment, is a very, very difficult test. Wouldn't it be cool if someone did some Buick 455 testing? I agree. Off topic, but didn't the heads and cam carb 4.8 make a 405? I'm sure over 400 horsepower out of a 4.8 is not hard to do, even with just a cam, with the right cam. We did almost 500 on the 4.8 with the right heads, cam, and intake on the stock bottom end. Can you use a intercooler before the supercharger? You can. The problem is that they become much more restrictive when you're drawing through them as opposed to forcing air through them. Randall, Barry Robotnik, has a ton of dyno time at FEs and won the FE shootouts with his builds. He's run at the West Tech a few times. He does good stuff. Tyler, see, this is what boggles my mind. The HV3 insert adds power. So does it add power? Which shortens the runner, making the SC runner superior. Short runners add power at higher engine speeds. They'll lose power down low. No amount of magic will change that. They do that every time. It's a law of physics. Where that happens is determined by the specific things that you test. But there's no short runner that's 3 or 4 inches long that's going to make more low speed power than a 10 or 12 or 14-inch runner. It doesn't do that. And it does it NA and it does it boosted, the same thing. Tyler, I have a Vortec 350 block that needs sleeving. You're going to put a 4125 bore in it and put the L99 4.3 liter crank in it. So 3-inch stroke crank, because I have it laying around. That's a good combination. As long as that block, will it take a 4125 bore without Siamesing the bores? Check and see, make sure that you have enough room in between there. I don't remember what the bore center is. Aaron, you were done with the Supercharger 3800, hit it with a ton of nitrous. No, we're going to run a turbo on it. Robzilla Garage, what caused you to start the Big Bang motors, and why don't big name companies do this? Well, they don't want to sacrifice motors. Sacrificing a junkyard motor is one thing. Sacrificing a well-built, expensive motor is a whole nother thing. I wouldn't do that either. I wouldn't sacrifice a $6,000 or $8,000 or $10,000 motor like I wouldn't expect Tom Nelson to sacrifice one of his $25,000 motors to see how much power it makes. I mean, it makes 2,500 already, so that's more than enough. But I did it only because we wanted to find out, back in the day in 2010-ish or whatever, when we did this, that people were saying the same thing they're saying about Hondas and 5 liters and modular motors and everything else. Oh, those things will only take 10 pounds or whatever, 8 pounds, whatever the number is. And I'm like, well, let's find out what they really take. And then it started going up and, up and up and up and up, and then just got crazy. Randall, we ran split height runner stacks, kind of like the old Can-Am stuff. Yeah, Casey, a ring gap test. We've talked about that. It's just a lot of work to take the motor all apart and change the rings. Brandon, the turbo will have an intercooler on it. Richard, are there long and short tunnel rams? Yeah, there are. There are tunnel rams that definitely have different lengths. You see that a lot in big block stuff. And tunnel rams, you can look at, I think I have the video up there. Tunnel ram on the big block Chevy that we tested it on, picked up power, made more power than the single plane up top, and made every bit as much low speed power listed the range that we were in as the dual plane. The nice thing about the tunnel ram is that unlike a single plane, it doesn't have 4 longs and 4 shorts. All the runners are the same length. And if you can make them all the long runner version of what the single plane is, then typically it will kind of be the best of both. Although a lot of big block stuff that runs high RPM, they run very short tunnel rams. Darwin, Australia is in the house. Question, if running on methanol, which would make your engine run cooler, could you get away with factory NA ring gap with high boost? Try it and see. I always put more ring gap in it because more ring gap doesn't hurt you. It can only help you. And the methanol is not going to, how much is the methanol going to change combustion temperature and piston temperature, and then by association ring temperature? How much is it actually going to change that? Is it going to change it from 1,100 or 1,200 or 1,500 or whatever the number is down to 7 or 8% less of that? Is that enough not to have ring gap? Alex, if you're going to build one, a 3800, you should do a turbo one. James, when will you be turbocharging? It won't be later tonight, so it'll be sometime in the future. How much does intake temp affect exhaust temp? I'm told it affects it 1-to-1. I haven't directly measured that, though. That's what Kenny Bell told me. Yeah, Robzilla Garage, I hear you. That it's a good test, but the problem is that what you're suggesting And his comment is, even the junkyard motors are cheaper. If a company is going to say Hemi pistons, for example, are weak, show me the Carfax. How much will it hold? The problem is, if you go get a motor from the wrecking yard and do a test like I did, a big bang motor, we then assume that all of the motors from the wrecking yard will do that. That's not an accurate assumption. Maybe the one that I got was the best one there. Maybe it was the middle of the road one there. Maybe it was the worst one there, like the L32. Maybe it was structurally unsound already, and then when I did the test, it blew up early. We don't know that because we don't know what happened to the motor beforehand. And even if we knew, it'd be a difficult assertion because you don't know what happened to the structure of the metal and how much it deformed it or how much it weakened it until we actually do a test. So you'd have to do a whole series of tests on a bunch of stock ones to figure out what they do and what their breaking point is, and eliminate everything else that could cause that breakage other than like the metallurgical strength. That's really, really hard to do. That's really, really, and we're back. So that's a hard thing to test. That's why they don't do it. Tyler, the only benefit from the NA manifold on 3800 would be plenum size. That's not accurate. Plenum size has very, very little effect on power. Runner length. Think runner length. Swapping to a lower thermostat definitely does help. It hurts fuel mileage, but it helps power. Will you twin charge the 3800 turbo and supercharger? We've already done that. That video is already up. Take a look at the playlist on the 3800 playlist. It has all that there. We did that on the L32. We ran the factory M90 supercharger, and then we ran a turbo blowing into the supercharger. So DJ, you haven't tested the HV3. So that's why I want to test stuff like that. I want to show them, like in a structured environment, what happens. Because there's a lot of people that sell things want to tell you that they do particular things. They don't always do that because they're trying to sell it to you. Oh yeah, no, it adds, yeah, you don't lose any low speed power. So you change your runner length by 6 inches and you don't add any low speed, or you don't lose any low speed power. That's not possible. It's going to lose low speed power. That's not the question. We already know that that's the answer is yes, you're going to. The question is, how much do you lose and where do you lose it? Do you lose it in an RPM range that you're going to be using it a lot? Like if we run this big bang motor to 6,500 RPM, I don't care what happens at 7,000. If I don't run it any higher than 6,500 RPM, you probably want what most people would want on the street or at the track is you want an intake manifold that produces the most average power up to 6,500 RPM. That's going to be your shift point. On the big bang, we might not actually want that. We might want to take away some torque. So we would maybe purposely do a shorter runner that loses low speed torque because it's gonna, and then takes away some turbo response, which we want because we don't want a big torque number. We just want a big peak power number, which a short runner turbocharged deal will get us. Brendan, yeah, we did test the Series 3 3800. We ran an L32 before this, and this is an L67 Series 2. Take a look at the playlist that has all the 3800 testing. There's a whole series on a whole bunch of tests run on the L32. Can a stock Dodge 5.2 Magnum take a turbo? Yes. How bad does cam and converter hurt mileage on an LS? The converter probably will hurt you more than the camshaft will. If you put a mild camshaft in, you might not hurt it at all. Why didn't you put ARP studs and all on the Cadillac 500 and then test it again without a turbo? It doesn't need ARP studs. It needs a good head gasket. Are you going to test the gutted supercharger housing, but instead of NA with a turbo? We're going to compare the gutted housing versus the NA intake manifolds, NA, and then we'll pick the best one and run that with a turbo. They don't do anything different on the turbo. Whatever they do NA and you add the turbo, it just adds to that. So if it loses a bunch of low-speed power, it's going to do that with a turbo. In fact, it's going to make the turbo worse because it's not going to spool as well if it loses a bunch of low-speed power, which that short runner manifold should. But it will be interesting to compare them. But we don't have to compare them NA and a turbo because it will be the same thing. Darwin, thank you very much. I do like testing. Casey, I don't know if anybody makes an MLS head gasket. I'm sure they do. I'm sure that the Cadco guys, I'm sure the Courtney and those guys have to have MLS head gaskets on his twin turbo deal that he does because he's making like silly power with that thing. Steven, what about compound setup with intercooler under the blower and an intercooler between the turbo and the supercharger? That would be the ideal way to go, to have everything intercooled, especially after the blower. It'd be best if the intercooler was after the blower, if you only choose one. Having one after the turbo and after the blower, very good idea. And then if you want to add water meth injection, if you have two intercoolers, there's no need for the water meth injection. Yeah, and you could always have somebody, the guys from Cometic will make you custom gaskets. DJ, will you reveal your cam specs for the Big Bang turbo motor? Yeah, I'm not doing a custom cam. I'm going to buy some kind of shelf cam. Shelf cams are the way to go. Custom cam is just silly. We can make I don't need a cut. I'm not, because people are looking at this the wrong way. I'm not trying to make as much power as I can with the motor. We're trying to find out how much power the motor will withstand. That's a different thing. Like we can make, all we have to do is keep turning the turbo up and we could make power. So even if I pick a camshaft that's down 10 horsepower, pretty easy to turn up. So it's not a big deal. So there's never going to be a shortage of power available. Like if we put 1,000 horsepower turbo on it, that combination could make 1,000 horsepower with a good cam, a bad cam. It's not going to make any difference. It will make 1,000 horsepower if we turned it up high enough. So we don't have to worry about that. But yeah, I'm just gonna pick some kind of shelf cam that will make the power that we want. I don't know which cam I'm going to use yet. Maybe whatever somebody has in stock. Richard, you'll break it at 600. I'd be willing to bet we go way over 600. Very intrigued by the Caddy 500. Is there money in the budget? There's no budget. MLS head gasket and a turbo on that motor. I'm not interested in doing any more turbo stuff on that Cadillac motor, I don't think. I'd rather just put it back together and run it, make sure it works, and then sell it to somebody. Barton, the video about water meth, you said you had to seriously change the tune. Yeah, we put it back to 11.8 or so, which is where we had run the other one. Did you do any pulls with the meth injection at 11.1? Yeah, when we put the meth injection on there, that's about where it was. It was down in the 10s at the initial part of the run, but it was about 11.0 or so when we were running it with that number 6 nozzle and the way that we had it scaled. So, and it made a lot less power at that air fuel ratio. Jeff, I'm doing a 396, but not a maximum power deal. I'm doing a 375 horse L78 396 replica to show what it made, and then to show what different headers do and stuff. DJ, I don't know. Will that ST5 cam fit stock piston to valve clearance? KD, you just built a couple 396s. Very cool. Oh, Daniel, you got to watch the Engine Masters episode? That was fun. I haven't seen any of those. I haven't seen the aired ones yet. And whatever camshaft I pick for the 3800 will run it NA also. Can you tell me a good setup to hit 500 wheel horsepower with a 2007 LS2? 500 wheel horsepower is going to be hard to do NA. It takes a lot. With boost, it's very easy. Just add boost to what you have there, and it will do that. Yeah, Scott, we've been considering doing 2 3800s on something. Use the cam intense racing, made 810 horsepower with the twin setup. Did they do that with forged pistons and all that stuff on that motor? Yeah, Corey, there's always going to be people who dislike the video. They could be somebody that I kicked off of here before for being a knucklehead. On a nitrous race gas application, how could you keep engine temperatures down? You shouldn't have a problem with engine temperature if you have a good radiator and good fan on it. Dan, you have an original L78? Our old school math always comes out 50% increase in torque for the first 7.5 pounds. That's the Holdner power boost formula. If you're changing at a half an atmosphere, you're going to change the power by 50%. You don't do that on a supercharged version. You do that on a turbo version, especially if you're running E85, and especially if you're running E85 and an intercooler and you have enough timing and all that stuff. It's a very simple thing. You double the power output at another atmosphere. Okay, the ZZP Stage 5 cam can be used on factory heads. I'm not worried about the factory heads. I'm worried about the factory piston to valve clearance. We can modify the head so that we can get the lift that we want. All that's very easy. But is the duration too much to work on a factory piston to valve clearance? That's what I need to find out. Yeah, we are doing a ported heads for the 3800. I'm going to do a set, or somebody's going to do a set of mildly ported heads, something that flows like 215 or 220 probably. And then we'll do some double throwdown heads, stage 17s. The SD5 will clear. Okay. Oh, Chris, so the guys in Australia are making 650 rear wheel horsepower on stock L67 bottom ends. Nice. Okay, no issues with piston clearance on those EZP ST cams. Good. We want to be able to put, that's one of the critical things, is being able to put enough camshaft in it. Okay, one more minute. Blind Guy Garage, I'm happy to help out. Somebody give me one more question. Jeff, I want to test. Okay, you'll get the last question. So he's building 396s, and I want to build the 375 horse version or the 425 horse version if it came in a 1965 Corvette. So I want to build that motor like I did all the other small blocks, and it'll be the first of hopefully a couple of big blocks that I do that are these retro reproductions of the original factory muscle car stuff. So this 396 is going to be very cool, because we'll get to run the stock exhaust manifolds and headers and show, you know, how much power they really made and how much they lost by not having headers on them, and all that stuff will be good. And we'll be able to show what they did, because all the ones that I've seen where guys have run them, they've always changed something on them. It's not the right camshaft, or it's not the right cylinder heads, or they have a roller cam in it, or whatever, you know, roller rockers, or the things, whatever things that they've changed. So we're going to try to make it as true as I can, and then put it together and run it, and then see what it does, and then tell people, hey, look, it made more than 375 horsepower. It made less than 425, or whatever the number is. And obviously the way that I run it on the dyno is different than the way that the factory rates them. Although back then in the mid 60s, they were much more liberal about the ratings. And a lot of times the ratings weren't accurate anyway, even if they ran it on the dyno and they ran it in a gross rated form, not the way that it is in the car. A lot of times not with stock exhaust manifolds, with optimized tune and all that stuff. Because sometimes they wanted to, for marketing purposes, they wanted to make as much power as they could. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes they didn't want to rate it at a lot of power because they wanted lower insurance levels, and also because they wanted it factored correctly or conservatively for a drag racing class. So if the motor made 425 and they could get it rated at 350 by the NHRA, obviously it would do pretty well. So they played games going both ways. They weren't all overrated and they weren't all underrated. And then when we went to the net rating, we saw things got a little more accurate, because then they rated them more the way that they were in the car and not some optimized dyno thing like I do. So it'll be interesting to see what it does. It'll be interesting to see what it does compared to, we'll have a fairly good idea, excuse me, compared to the small blocks that we did, like the Boss 351, the Boss 302, the DZ 302, all of those. So we can kind of get an idea how the small block, and it is kind of other guys for big blocks, even though it's a big block Chevy. When anybody does big block Chevys, they always do a 454. Like when I go to the wrecking yard, that's what we always get. I never find a 396 or a 402 or anything like that. We find 454s, Gen 5s, Gen 6s, sometimes a Mark IV, but we usually don't even get those because they're going to be a 2-bolt block. Not that we can't make a bazillion horsepower out of a 2-bolt block, but the 396 you hardly ever see, because nobody says, oh, I want to build a 396. You don't do that when you can build a 427 or a 454 or a 496 or a 632 or whatever. Because if you're going to build a big one, build a big one. Don't build a small block size big block. Build a big block size big block, because the bigger the motor, the more power it makes, right? Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow. I'm working on this video on the L32 and the L67, and then we're going to jump back into some other kind of engine families for a while, because I've kind of worked over the 3800 stuff. Thanks, guys. I'll see you tomorrow.